near 85, and then partly sunny Saturday, breezy, warm, and humid, a high at 89. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
64 O'Hare, 68 Lakefront. Next news 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Make sure to check out the Income Store live video stream of today's show right now at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, one of the key exchanges yesterday, and it was fairly early on, that really put Bob Mueller behind the eight ball and must have had a lot of congressional Democrats thinking, we've made a terrible mistake.
What did we do here?
It was Jim Jordan and Bob Mueller. And this is important because it lays out the very curious lack of intellectual curiosity the Mueller team had about certain aspects of what did or didn't happen in 2016. And what Jim Jordan starts with is the beginning, the origins of the investigation. Names that you've heard throughout the last 3 years, Jim Jordan nicely stitches together to provide a real indictment of the judgment calls the Mueller team made. Remember the name Joseph Mifsud? Maybe you've heard it, vague recollection. It's a name that's important and completely ignored by Bob Mueller, including when Mifsud committed crimes, the same crimes that other people were prosecuted for. And that's what Jordan wanted to explore with Mueller.
In that interview, Mr. Mifsud lied. You point this out on page 193, volume 1. Mifsud denied. Mifsud also falsely stated. In addition, Mifsud omitted. 3 times he lied to the FBI, yet you didn't charge him with the crime.
Excuse me, did you say one? I'm sorry, did you say 193?
Volume 1, 193. He lied 3 times.
along.
You pointed out in the report. Why didn't you charge him with the crime?
I can't get into internal deliberations with regard who would or would not be
Charge a lot of other people for making a false statement. Let's remember this. In 2016, the FBI did something they probably haven't done before. They spied on 2 American citizens associated with a presidential campaign, George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. With Carter Page, they went to the FISA court. They used the now famous dossier as part of the reason they were able to get the warrant and spy on Carter Page for a better part of a year. With Mr. Papadopoulos, they didn't go to the court. They used human sources. All kinds of, from about the moment Papadopoulos joins the Trump campaign, you got all these people all around the world starting to swirl around him. Names like Halper, Downer, Mifsud, Thompson, meeting in Rome, London, all kinds of places. The FBI even sent a lady posing as somebody else, went by the name Azra Turk, even dispatched her to London to spy on Mr. Papadopoulos. In one of these meetings, Mr. Papadopoulos is talking to a foreign diplomat, and he tells the diplomat, Russians have dirt on Clinton. That diplomat then contacts the FBI, and the FBI opens an investigation based on that fact. You point this out on page 1 of the report. July 31st, 2016, they open the investigation based on that piece of information. Diplomat tells Papadopoulos, Papadopoulos tells the diplomat, Russians have dirt on Clinton. Diplomat tells the FBI. What I'm wondering is, who told Papadopoulos? How'd he find out?
I can't get into the evidentiary
Yes, you can, because you wrote about it. You gave us the answer. Page 192 of the report, you tell us who told him. Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud's a guy who told Papadopoulos. The mysterious professor who lives in Rome and London, teaches in 2 different universities. This is the guy who told Papadopoulos. He's the guy who starts it all. And when the FBI interviews him, he lies 3 times, and yet you don't charge him with a crime.
Oh, my goodness.
All goes back to Joseph Mifsud, tells Papadopoulos, who, of course, was charged with and pled out to lying to the FBI, and then to the Australian diplomat, and then it opens the floodgates. That's how the last 3 years started. So now this is important. It goes back to what Trey Gowdy said prior to Mueller's testimony yesterday. Let's establish what we already know to be true. Let's focus on what we know to be true. What we know to be true is disturbing enough, in addition to all the unanswered questions that lead to supposition in all directions. What we know to be true. Mifsud, who lied to the FBI, not prosecuted. Papadopoulos takes the lie and passes it on to an Australian diplomat. Papadopoulos charged for lying about that exchange, even though we've talked to Papadopoulos on the show.
Yeah, we have. Spent a few days in jail.
He suggests that this was the path of least resistance. He didn't really consider what he said to be lying, but that's secondary. And then the last 3 years, no interest there. No interest in talking about the origins of the investigation. That's what Bob Mueller said yesterday. Doesn't even know, as you just heard him get caught up again. Didn't know what Fusion GPS is. That's what a lot of people are talking about. Well, that is unbelievable. But another chin to the floor moment is, who told Papadopoulos? I'm not going to get into that. You're not going to get into it. It's right here in your report.
Yeah.
Joseph Mifsud, who lied 3 times, right here in your report. You didn't charge. Right here, obviously, we know he was in charge. So why not? I can't get into that. You don't even know what you can and can't get into, even the stuff in your report.
Because he didn't write the report.
I know.
I know.
But
he wasn't even well-versed on the topic before he went before that congressional hearing.
Clearly. But
it was embarrassing.
But it was important for that to be exposed, and that Jim Jordan moment was expository. And so because Mueller didn't concern himself with the origins of the report, now Barr and his U.S. attorney appointee, point person, Durham, are. That was an important moment, in addition to Ratcliffe talking about the inconsistency with making a determination in Volume 1 and making no determination in Volume 2, in addition to Matt Gaetz going through the Steele dossier business, the other side of the 2016 election. Remember the other campaign that was running at the time, too? Those were the real important moments. And almost by the time we got off the air, maybe by 9:30 yesterday morning, it was over. It was over well before they broke for pudding, and he went off to the House Intel Committee. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Julie Kelly, senior contributor for AM Greatness, American Greatness, amgreatness.com. Julie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Well, you wrote a piece in advance of yesterday's hearing, basically saying, hey, Republicans, don't screw this up, and here's how you avoid screwing it up. So did they afford themselves well?
I think for the most part, they did. I think Mueller helped them tremendously with his disgraceful performance, if that's what you want to call it. And so I think that they landed a few punches that they needed to, and I think the clip from Jordan was one. John Ratcliffe, if your listeners haven't watched that, I think that they need to, not just because of how it exposes Mueller, but just how this entire investigation violated every legal rule and Department of Justice guideline, and Mueller sat there and basically admitted that that was the case. And so I think that Republicans, for the most part, did a good job. We'll see what kind of follow-up they have. But look, the Democrats don't seem to be giving up on this and are going to use whatever lame sound bites they can glean from yesterday's testimony to continue their impeachment crusade.
Well, Nadler seems hell-bent on getting Don McCann to testify because, the whole thing that President Trump allegedly told him to fire Robert Mueller. Do you believe that to be true?
I know that there's some discrepancies in the accounts there, but look, Amy, the president the president legally could have fired Robert Mueller at any time. It is in this. It's not a statute, but it's in the legal rules about the special counsel law that he can be dismissed. He could be fired. There has to be some kind of cause. But look, Mueller had all kinds of reasons. The reason Mueller should have been fired immediately was his conflict of interest with James Comey. You saw yesterday, he admitted that he and James Comey, not just for business associates, not that Jim Comey succeeded Robert Mueller as FBI director, they are close friends. And you have, especially in Volume 2, Robert Mueller depending on Jim Comey's notes, his diary, his memos, as grist for the obstruction of justice, a few of the obstruction of justice charges or allegations. So he should have been dismissed immediately. And it was within Trump's purview to fire Jim Comey. It was in his purview to fire Robert Mueller, which he didn't do. And so, I don't know where they're going to go with. I would personally like to see a little bit more vetting of the obstruction of justice allegations because I think they're highly flawed.
I wanted to get your reaction to this little tweet back and forth on Twitter between Jonah Goldberg and Molly Hemingway. Just in terms of getting sort of a never Trumper reaction to this, Jonah Goldberg tweeted, "Look, I think Mueller had a bad day. I think his performance bolstered the case that his staff ran the show, but Mueller also demonstrated that he is a vastly better man than Trump. Trump heaps gross scorn on him for 2 years, and Mueller refused a single ad hominem." I'm not sure what that standard is with respect to something as important as accusations of treason and the threat of impeachment, but Jonah Goldberg likes Bob Mueller better than he likes Donald Trump, and that's somehow important. Molly Hemingway responded, "Certainly true if you think aggressive insults are worse than the invention of a new standard of justice applied to only one person to replace the standard that innocence is presumed until guilt is proven," which was the John Ratcliffe exchange with Bob Mueller that you just referenced.
Right.
But what about the Jonah Goldberg reaction to 7 hours of Bob Mueller yesterday and just focusing on who didn't call whom names as if that's like that's a top line?
Well, I'm sure Paul Manafort from his solitary confinement cell at Rikers Island would like to have a word with Jonah Goldberg about what an upstanding guy Robert Mueller is. Look, people like Jonah Goldberg, David French, Bill Kristol, they have been all in on this collusion fiction from the get-go. Jonah has exposed himself several times, and I've seen Molly do it on Fox News. He can't really discuss any of the details about this investigation, how it started, how it's proceeded, what a complete sham and farce it's been. And so they're disappointed that this didn't turn out the way it was supposed to, right? They were supposed to find collusion. It wasn't there. They were supposed to proceed with obstruction of justice charges. Mueller tap danced around that. He did as much as he could, including going after the president's son repeatedly for a 20-minute meeting that was a setup by the Fusion GPS people to help launch and fuel this collusion narrative. So Robert Mueller is not a stand-up guy at all. He's destroyed people's lives. He knew from the beginning there was no collusion. This was an obstruction of justice case. Now, keep in mind, too, the obstruction of justice was really what Mueller was after.
Right.
Because after his friend Jim Comey was fired, Andrew McCabe, his deputy, who was the acting FBI director, opened up a criminal case against a sitting president for obstruction of justice. That's really what Mueller was going after. And so, Jonah and David French and Bill Kristol and all these people are really disappointed. And people like Jonah, they like Jeffrey Epstein more than they like Donald Trump. So they will side with anybody against the president.
Well, and the other thing about what you were saying with respect to the collusion part of it, the conspiracy, criminal conspiracy part of it, that's really what we're talking about. There was an effort to try and get out of Mueller, when did you know that there was no criminal conspiracy? You obviously made that determination at some time before the report was drafted and published, and Mueller wouldn't give a specific answer on that either.
Right.
And that was terribly problematic. There had to be a moment where you knew we don't have criminal conspiracy here, and we're going to focus our remaining time and resources on obstruction to the extent we were pursuing both simultaneously. He wouldn't answer that, and I don't believe it's because he can't remember. I just believe he was dodging it.
That's exactly right, because he's not going to come out and say basically what I just said, is that this was never a collusion investigation. This one was an obstruction of justice investigation, and they dragged it out as long as they possibly could until who shows up? Bill Barr shows up and says, you're going to wrap this up. I'm going to close you down. Finish up your report. There's nothing there. And otherwise, who knows how long this would have dragged out. I'm sure that Mueller and his team would still be looking for indictments, would still be pursuing Donald Trump's son, his family, his business interests, anyone related to him, if Bob Barr had not been appointed the new attorney general.
Wow. So where do you think we're going to go from here? I mean, Nancy Pelosi has to decide whether or not impeachment's still on the table.
Oh,
There's a lot of vacillation.
she's decided. She's decided.
So then she's just
Nadler and
stringing
Schiff-
everyone along?
Yeah, she's got to keep her caucus together. But Nancy Pelosi, I mean, I don't know what your take is. There is no way Nancy, and the New Republic opines on this too. Nancy Pelosi allowing impeachment to move forward at the behest of Nadler and Schiff and the Social Spice Girls, that's not going to happen. Not after yesterday.
No, I agree with you there, and I think even commentators on the left were acknowledging that yesterday. That I think who's Terry Moran at
Terry
ABC
Moran
News
said,
he came out and said this impeachment is dead. If you're going to use this guy and his investigation and his report that has his name on it, but apparently he didn't even read the first page of it. But look, here's what's coming next, and we've talked about this. I've written extensively. Is the John Durham investigation into the investigators, and so that's ongoing now. The DOJ Inspector General report about FISA abuse and how that targeted Carter Page in using the dossier, that has now been extended and is expected in September. That's what these Democrats and Never Trumpers and Mueller people are really fearful about. Is what is going to come out, how the dossier was used, how plans like Joseph Mifsud, who you were just talking about with the exchange with Jim Jordan, how they were setting up the Trump campaign as early as March of 2016 to start this bogus collusion plotline. But who was really colluding with the Russians? The Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC through Christopher Steele. Another liar like Mifsud, who's still off the hook and running his consulting business in London and representing Russian oligarchs.